Declan Donnellan. I've been a huge admirer of his for a long time. I've seen quite a lot of his productions, and I love this book. Bel Ami is the most extraordinary story. I've always liked Maupassant, and actually they've been trying to make a film. They've made a number of television series of it, and they've been trying to make a feature film of it for quite a while. So I was very glad when it came, because about 15 years ago I was asked to do something, play a different part in it, and it never got made. And so I was really pleased when I heard about it, and actually petitioned to take part in it. I wrote to Declan and said, "Listen, you've got to let me play Madame Rousset." It's the whole world of the sort of demi-monde Parisian thing, and at this time in the late 19th century. That's very exciting to me. I love it visually. I love the idea of. I love the story of this man who is doing whatever he needs to do to get to the top of the tree. I love the fact that he uses these women, and he thinks he's using these women, but these women all have their own agenda, and I think it's just a really interesting plot. This character was attractive to me because I loved the idea of playing somebody who relinquishes her dignity, really. I think who gives everything up. She's very religious, Madame Rousset, and wouldn't ever think of having an affair with him or having a lover. And it's a really huge step for her to take on Georges Duroy, and then of course she falls head over heels in love with him, and that's the end of her because he's so cruel. It is interesting how the film talks about the power of the press. Obviously today, with newspapers dwindling and things being on the internet, information is much more readily available. But certainly you hear a lot about the influence of the press on the public opinion, and how even in Britain the press was accused of running the country at some point. And in this film, this is exactly what's happening, really. The other women are all involved in some way with the newspaper that belongs to her husband. I think Madame Rousset is probably somebody who's a sort of bourgeoise, who's come from the country perhaps, who has married this man who has become a sort of self-made millionaire, who is virtually running the country because he's got the most powerful newspaper of the time. And so she sort of accepts the environment that sometimes she has to go into. I think she's probably a lot happier with the ladies from the church rather than these very glamorous and rather outre women that she's introduced to in the film. And she doesn't really have that much to do with them. And the connecting thread through that is George, who decides quite, heartlessly to seduce this poor woman to get what he needs. And so she becomes one of them, but I don't think she really has a connection with them. I think Declan directs actors extraordinarily well, but he has a very detailed approach to work and can give you some very interesting direction. And I think that's his forte. That's where he's really, really clever. Nick is more visual. But it's their first film, so they've been discovering a lot of things that you can and you can't do. And at the same time, because it's their first film, there's something really fresh about it all. And Declan will spend a lot of time, for example, with the supporting, not the supporting cast, but the, what do you call them, extras, with all the crowd scenes. He'll spend a lot of time directing the crowd and getting the crowd to really move, which is really great, because you see so often when you're making films, especially period films, when everyone's terribly uncomfortable because we have all these costumes on, the support, the crowds will be very stiff and kind of switched off and just waiting for it all to be over. But he really gets them involved, and he really directs them physically, gives them physical movement to do, and makes them really feel that they're part of the film. And I think that's really one of his strong points, that is getting the whole atmosphere right. We decided that we were going to have a blonde, a brunette and a redhead. So from then on, the colours all change. I went for the redhead, please. I'll be the redhead, please. Because I just like the idea of being a bit different from the others, from a lot of women. And I think the costumes sort of all happened pretty organically, actually. They were all made in Paris, which is very handy for me. And we decided, because the budget was been pretty restricted, we had to make the same skirt and then different top halves, because these all break down. You cannot believe how many layers there are underneath here. So you'd have an evening top to go with the skirt and a day top, and then the hats, and it's all a bit of a palaver, but it looks amazing. It really is extraordinary. What Declan's allowing me to do in this film is really let rip. And there was a scene when I discover that my daughter has run off with my lover. And I was allowed to do what no one else would have allowed me to do. Quite a lot of very physical acting, which I really enjoy, which is interesting to do when you're so, encased in this armour, which is this corset, and it's very interesting to do a lot of physical stuff with that, running around, being dragged. I spent the morning being dragged across the floor. I have yet to take off my costume to find out how many bruises I've got, but we'll see. It's pretty torturous stuff that goes on in the story. There's some pretty low moments. There's so much greed in there. There's so much lust. There's a lot of really nasty passions that are in this story, which is always great to do in acting.